Millionaire spent 12 years looking for his missing daughter. Then a maid entered his estate. For 12 years, Daniel Ashworth searched for his daughter. He built one of the largest real estate empires on the eastern seaboard. He owned towers in Charleston, resorts on Hilton Head Island, and a private jet that could take him anywhere on Earth in a matter of hours. But none of it mattered. Not $1 of it mattered. Because 12 years ago, on a warm September morning, his 5-year-old daughter walked out onto a hotel patio in her small yellow sundress, and she never walked back. No ransom note, no witness, no trace, just a single pink sandal left behind on the stone path, and a father who never, not for a single night, stopped believing she was still alive. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning 12 years later, a young woman in a secondhand coat walked through the front gates of the Ashworth estate, looking for work as a housekeeper. And the moment Daniel saw the small crescent-shaped birthmark on the inside of her wrist, his entire world tilted sideways. Because it was the exact same birthmark his missing daughter had. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. It truly means a lot to see how far these stories connect with people around the world. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Because to understand what happened that gray Tuesday morning, you first need to understand everything Daniel Ashworth lost. 12 years earlier, Daniel Ashworth was already one of the wealthiest men in South Carolina. His company, Ashworth Enterprises, had its name on hotels, office towers, and waterfront developments up and down the coast. He had every kind of success a person could measure, except the one thing that actually mattered to him. His daughter, Lily. She was 5 years old, all gap-toothed smiles and scraped knees, and she owned her father completely. Every morning before his first meeting, she would burst into his home office in her pajamas and climb straight onto his lap, ignoring every closed laptop and every ringing phone. "Daddy, guess what? I'm working, Lilybug." "You're not working. You're smiling." And he was. He always was when she was around. His wife, Eleanor, loved their daughter too. At least that was what everyone around them believed, including Daniel. They lived in a sprawling home just outside Charleston, the kind with iron gates and a view of the marsh at sunset. And from the outside, the Ashworths looked like they had been handed a perfect life. That summer, Daniel planned a family trip to a private resort on Hilton Head Island. It was supposed to be 3 days of nothing, sand, sun, and his daughter's laughter echoing down the beach. Instead, it became the beginning of the worst chapter of his life. The morning it happened started like any other. Lily was playing near the hotel's garden patio, while Daniel took a business call a few yards away. Eleanor was inside at the restaurant. Security patrolled the grounds, the same as always. Nobody could have predicted what was about to happen. Daniel finished his call and turned around. Lily, no answer. He scanned the garden. Empty. His pulse started to climb. Lily. He checked behind the hedges. Nothing. He ran toward the pool. Nothing. And then he saw it. A small yellow sandal, lying on its side beside the garden gate. His entire world stopped in that instant. Lily. Within minutes, the resort was in lockdown. Police blocked every exit road. Every car leaving the property was searched down to the trunk. But there was no ransom call. No note. No demand. No witness who had seen a thing. Just one small sandal and a hole in the world where his daughter used to be. For weeks, Daniel barely slept. He personally joined search parties along the coastline. He hired private investigators, offered a reward that made national news, and had teams check every shelter, every hospital, and every foster placement from Georgia to North Carolina. He papered gas stations and rest stops from Savannah to Wilmington with her photograph. A little girl with a gap-toothed smile and a yellow sundress, last seen near the garden patio of a Hilton Head resort. He answered every single tip line call himself, even the ones that came in at 3 in the morning, even the ones that turned out to be nothing at all. Nothing. It was as if the earth had simply opened up and swallowed her whole. Reporters camped outside the Ashworth estate for months. Daniel gave interview after interview, staring directly into the camera and begging whoever had his daughter to simply leave her somewhere safe. A church, a police station, anywhere. No questions asked, no consequences, just bring her home. Nobody ever answered that plea. Slowly, the news vans packed up and drove away, one by one, until the story of the missing Ashworth girl became just another cold case folder gathering dust in a filing cabinet somewhere downtown. 3 months in, Eleanor finally broke. She found him one night surrounded by photographs of Lily spread across his office desk. "Daniel," she said quietly, "we have to accept it." He didn't even look up. "Accept what?" "That she's gone." "She's not gone." His voice cracked as he said it. "She's alive." "I know it." "You don't know that." "I know my daughter." He stood, eyes wet. "I'll search for 3 years. 10 years. 20. I don't care how long it takes." Eleanor said nothing. She just turned and walked out of the room, and Daniel kept searching, year after year, long after everyone else had quietly moved on. 12 years later, on that gray Tuesday morning, Daniel stood in the marble entryway of his own home, staring at a young woman he had never met. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, tugging at the sleeve of her coat. "Claire. Claire Bennett." "Where were you born?" "Savannah," she said, clearly confused by the question. "Why does that?" When Daniel took a step closer, his heart suddenly pounding against his ribs. "June 3rd, she said. "Sir, is something wrong?" Something was wrong because June 3rd was Lily's birthday. He stared down at her wrist, and there it was. The crescent-shaped birthmark. The exact size, the exact place, and the exact shape as the one his daughter had. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Who are your parents?" Claire's eyes dropped to the floor. "I don't know. I was told I was found as a baby." "Found where?" "I don't remember. I was raised by a woman named Ruth Callahan. Everyone called her Miss Ruthie." Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Is she still?" "She passed 3 years ago." He looked past Claire toward the staircase, where his wife Eleanor stood frozen, one hand gripping the banister. And what struck him wasn't that she looked confused. It was that she didn't look confused at all. She looked terrified. "Claire," Daniel said quietly, "show me your wrist." She hesitated, glancing between him and Eleanor, before slowly raising her arm. Daniel stared at the birthmark, then at her face. Her eyes, the small dimple near her mouth, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was nervous. It was Lily. It was unmistakably, impossibly Lily. "Who brought you here?" he asked, his voice breaking. Claire pointed toward the head housekeeper, standing near the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Doyle said the estate needed extra help." Mrs. Doyle stepped forward, flustered. "Sir, she came through the staffing agency, same as always, I." "Who recommended her specifically?" Daniel cut in. Before Mrs. Doyle could answer, Eleanor's voice rang out from the stairs. "Daniel, that's enough." He turned slowly. "Enough. She's just a housekeeper. You're frightening the poor girl." "Why are you so nervous, Eleanor?" "I'm not nervous. You haven't moved from that spot since she walked in the door." His eyes narrowed. 12 years, and I've never once seen you look at anyone the way you're looking at her right now." For the first time in over a decade of marriage, Daniel felt something shift permanently inside him. He no longer trusted his wife's face. That night, he sat alone in his study with 2 photographs side by side on his desk, one of Lily at 5 years old and one he'd secretly taken of Claire that afternoon. He studied them for over an hour. The resemblance wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Riley, the private investigator who had worked his daughter's case from the very beginning. "Marcus, I need you to look into someone." Quietly. "Who am I looking at?" "A young woman. Claire Bennett. I need everything. Birth records, foster records, medical history, anything you can find." "And Daniel," Marcus said carefully, "why the sudden urgency?" Daniel looked at the 2 photographs again. "Because I think I just found my daughter." He hung up, unaware that a shadow had been standing just outside the study door the entire time. Eleanor. She had heard every word. The next morning, before Claire had even finished her first cup of coffee, Eleanor pulled her into an empty sitting room and shut the door. "How old are you?" 20, Claire answered, startled. "Where exactly were you raised?" "Mostly around Savannah." "Who told you about your childhood?" "Miss Ruthie. She said I was found as a toddler, wandering alone. Nobody ever came looking, so she took me in." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "What do you actually remember?" "Anything from before her." Claire frowned. "Why does it matter to you?" "Just answer the question." Claire's eyes drifted, unfocused, like she was reaching for something buried deep. "I remember a man's voice. Not his face, just his voice." She paused. "He used to call me his little firefly." The color drained from Eleanor's face. Little Firefly. That had been Daniel's private nickname for Lily. No one outside their household had ever known it. Not their friends, not the press, not even the police report. No one. Anything else? Eleanor's voice had gone thin. A garden, Claire said slowly. Flowers everywhere. A big white house. And a man who smelled like cedar and expensive cologne. If you've ever had a moment where a memory came flooding back out of nowhere, where your body remembered something your mind had buried, drop a comment and tell me about it. I read every single one, and I want to know I'm not the only one who believes some things never really disappear. Eleanor grabbed Claire's arm, her composure cracking completely. Where did you get that scar on your shoulder? I don't know, Claire said, alarmed now. I've always had it. You're lying to me. I'm not lying. I don't understand what's happening right now. Who sent you here? Who paid you to say these things? Nobody paid me anything. I applied for a job through an agency, that's all. That was the moment the door swung open. Daniel stood in the frame, having heard every word of it. What is going on in here? Eleanor forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing. We were just talking. I heard you accusing her of being paid to lie. Daniel's voice was low and dangerously calm. Why would you say that unless you already knew who she was? Eleanor said nothing. Claire, Daniel said gently. Please, go downstairs. Once she was gone, Daniel shut the door and turned back to his wife. Who is she, Eleanor? Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. After 12 years, Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. You finally bring her back? The second the words left his mouth, Eleanor's hand flew to cover her own lips. She had said too much, and she knew it. Bring who back? Daniel demanded, stepping closer. Say her name, Eleanor. Neither of them spoke for a long, terrible moment. Lily, Daniel finally whispered. No, Eleanor said, backing away. Daniel, no. Look at me and tell me the truth. Is Claire my daughter? Eleanor said absolutely nothing at all, and that silence told him everything he needed to know. That afternoon, Daniel quietly collected a water glass Claire had used, sealed it in a plastic bag, and drove it himself to a private lab across town, paying extra for a rushed paternity test. Then he waited 2 of the longest days of his life. When the envelope finally arrived, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely tear it open. He read the first line, then the second, then he stopped breathing entirely. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. His daughter was alive. After 12 years of empty search parties, false leads, and a wife who told him to move on, his daughter had been alive this entire time, and she had just walked back through his front door in a secondhand coat, applying for a job cleaning his floors. He stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. But before he could leave the office, the door opened again. Eleanor stepped inside, holding a small black leather bag against her chest. How long? Daniel said, holding up the DNA report. Have you known? Eleanor's legs seemed to give out beneath her, and she sank into the chair across from his desk. Daniel, please. How long have you known that Claire is our daughter? She covered her face with both hands and began to sob. I was afraid. Afraid of what? His voice cracked like thunder through the room. You let me spend 12 years believing she was dead. I didn't know what else to do. Where was she? Who took her? Eleanor lifted her head, and for the first time in their entire marriage, Daniel saw something in his wife's eyes that wasn't guilt. It was raw, unfiltered fear. I didn't take her, Eleanor whispered. Then who did? She looked toward the door, as if she were afraid the walls themselves might be listening. Your brother. Daniel felt the ground drop out from under him. Walter, his older brother, his business partner of over 20 years. The man who had helped him build Ashworth Enterprises from a single office into an empire that spanned 3 states. The man Daniel trusted with everything, his money, his company, his family. Eleanor reached into the black bag and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed Walter standing beside a laughing 5-year-old Lily, her hand tucked inside his. When did you get this? Daniel demanded. I didn't take the photo. Walter sent it to me. Years ago. Why? Because he wanted me to know she was alive. Eleanor's voice trembled violently now. He wanted leverage. Leverage for what? Eleanor met his eyes. Your company. Silence swallowed the room whole. He knew that if anything ever happened to you, Eleanor continued, Lily would inherit everything. Every share, every property, every dollar. So he made her disappear before that could ever happen. And you helped him? Daniel's voice rose to a roar. No. I tried to find her, Daniel. I swear it. But Walter threatened me. He said if I told you the truth, he'd make sure she never came back at all. permanently. Daniel couldn't speak. 12 years. 12 years his daughter had been alive somewhere in the world, while the people closest to him carried the secret like a stone in their chests. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Silence on the other end. Then a voice, calm, cold, and unmistakably familiar. You should stop asking questions, Daniel. His whole body went rigid. Who is this? A low, humorless laugh. You already know. Walter. You found your daughter, the voice said. But you still haven't figured out why I brought her back. The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone in his hand, then turned toward the window. Outside, in the fading afternoon light, Claire was walking slowly across the garden, completely unaware that she was standing in the middle of a storm that had been building for 12 years. His daughter, the child he had searched every corner of the country for. And suddenly it hit him. She hadn't wandered into his home by accident. Someone had placed her there deliberately. But why now, after all this time? He turned back toward the door. Where is Claire? Eleanor stood, alarmed. Why? Because she's in danger. They rushed downstairs together, but Claire's room was already empty. Her small suitcase, the one she'd arrived with just 2 days earlier, was gone. On the neatly made bed sat a single folded note in handwriting Daniel didn't recognize. His hands shook as he unfolded it. 7 words. If you want your daughter alive, come alone. Daniel stood in the doorway of that empty room for a long, silent moment, the note trembling between his fingers. 12 years he had dreamed of the day he would finally hold his daughter again. Now that day had come and gone in the span of 48 hours, and someone had already stolen it back from him. He turned to Eleanor, his voice hollow. How did he get to her? I don't know. Eleanor said, tears streaking down her face. I swear I don't know. Where would Walter take her? You've known him for 20 years, Eleanor. Think. She closed her eyes, and for a moment her whole body went still. Then her eyes snapped open. The old harbor warehouse. Daniel froze. What warehouse? It belonged to your father. Near the Charleston docks. Walter used to store shipping equipment there before the company ever made real money. Daniel was already dialing. Marcus, I need you to find someone. Who? My daughter. She's been taken. A pause on the line. By who? My brother. I think it's Walter. Where do I start? The old harbor warehouse, near the docks. Now. Understood. I'm moving. Daniel ended the call and grabbed his keys, but Eleanor caught his arm before he reached the door. You can't go alone. The note said I have to. That's exactly what he wants you to think. Her voice was suddenly sharp, urgent, and more clear-headed than he'd seen her in years. Daniel, think about it. This isn't just a threat. It's a trap. If Walter planned all of this, he's been watching this house the entire time. Daniel stopped cold, the truth landing on him all at once. He looked around the grand entryway, the cameras mounted in every corner, the security gates, and the staff who came and went daily. Someone inside this house had access to everything. He turned back to Eleanor, his eyes narrowing. Who knew Claire was Lily? Nobody, Daniel, I promise. That's not possible. He held up the note. Whoever took her from this house knew exactly who she was and exactly when to strike. Someone in this house told them. If you were in Daniel's position right now, 12 years of searching, finally holding your daughter's face in a photograph, and then watching her vanish again in less than 2 days, I want to know honestly, would you have gone to that warehouse alone? Type, I would go, or I would call for backup in the comments. I read every one of them, and this story isn't over yet. Meanwhile, miles away near the harbor, Claire opened her eyes in a room she didn't recognize. Her hands weren't tied, but the door was locked from the outside. Concrete walls surrounded her. A single small window, high up near the ceiling, was covered with rusted metal bars. In the distance, she could hear the low, steady sound of waves lapping against a dock. She stood, her legs unsteady. Hello. No answer. She moved toward the door and knocked. Is anyone there? The door creaked open. A tall man in an expensive gray suit stepped inside, and something about his face, the shape of his jaw, the color of his eyes, struck her as eerily familiar, though she couldn't place why. You're smarter than I expected, the man said. Claire stepped back instinctively. Where am I? Somewhere safe. For now. I want to go home. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Home? Which home would that be? Claire froze. Your father's estate? The man asked, watching her face carefully. Her eyes widened. You know who I am? I know exactly who you are. He studied her for a long moment. My name is Walter. I'm your uncle. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Why did you bring me here? Because your father has spent 12 years looking for you, Walter said, sitting down slowly across from her. And he finally found you. That was never supposed to happen. Did you take me? Claire's voice trembled. When I was 5, was it you? Walter didn't answer. Answer me, she said, stepping closer despite herself. Your father wasn't supposed to find you, Walter said instead. If he had, everything would have changed. I don't understand any of this. Walter rose to his feet, straightening his jacket. You will. But first, there's something you need to know. He paused at the door, glancing back at her almost gently. Your mother is alive. Claire's whole body went numb. My mother? I was told she died before I was even born. That's what your father believes, Walter said. It isn't the truth. Then where is she? Walter's mouth curled into something between a smile and a warning. Ask your father. And with that, he walked out, the heavy door locking behind him with a metallic thud that echoed through the empty room. Claire sank down against the concrete wall, her mind spinning. Everything she had ever believed about her own life, her childhood, her name, the woman who raised her, suddenly felt like a story someone else had written for her. At the same time, Daniel's car sped toward the old harbor district, headlights cutting through the evening fog rolling in off the water. He had ignored every single one of Eleanor's warnings. But he wasn't entirely alone. Hidden beneath the frame of his car was a small GPS tracker that Marcus had installed years earlier, back when the search for Lily had first gone cold. Daniel had no intention of walking into his brother's trap completely unprepared. As he approached the warehouse, he spotted a black SUV parked near the entrance. He killed his engine and stepped out into the cold, salt-heavy air. The building loomed ahead of him, rusted metal siding, broken windows, decades of neglect. The docks nearby were silent except for the creak of old rope against the pilings. Walter! His voice echoed off the metal walls. No response. He pushed through the heavy door. Darkness swallowed him whole for a moment, and then the overhead lights flickered on, buzzing to life one row at a time. Walter stood at the far end of the warehouse, hands in his pockets, waiting. Where is she? Daniel demanded, closing the distance between them. You always did get straight to the point, Walter said calmly. If you've touched a single hair on her head. Relax. Walter raised both hands. She's alive. Perfectly safe. Where? Close by. Walter's eyes drifted around the empty warehouse. Bring her out here right now. Walter chuckled, low and humorless. You're still giving orders, even here. On my property. Daniel's jaw tightened. This was never your property. Walter's expression darkened instantly. No. You're standing on property you stole from me. What are you talking about? Walter stepped closer, his calm finally cracking into something rawer. Do you honestly think you built Ashworth Enterprises alone? I was there from the beginning. I sacrificed everything for that company. You were my partner, Walter. I never denied that. Partner. Walter's laugh turned bitter. I helped build the original company with our father, and the moment he died, you took it all. Every share. Every property. My name disappeared from every document within a year. That's not true, isn't it? Walter pulled a thick folder from inside his coat and threw it onto a nearby crate. Look for yourself. Daniel opened it with shaking hands. Property deeds. Old bank statements. Company partnership agreements, decades old, some of them bearing signatures he didn't recognize. These are forged, Daniel said. They're not forged. They're real. Walter's voice was ice. Our father split the company between the two of us equally. But somewhere along the way, my half quietly disappeared. I never touched those documents. No, Walter agreed. You didn't. Your wife did. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Eleanor. She wanted full control, Walter said. Because eventually, everything was going to belong to Lily. And Eleanor made sure that when it did, there would be no one left standing between her daughter and the entire company. Not me. Not anyone. You're lying. Ask her yourself, Walter said quietly. If you can find the courage to hear the answer. For the first time in years, Daniel stood frozen, staring at the brother he had spent over a decade believing was a monster, and felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew. Back at the estate, Eleanor sat alone in the dim living room, an old photograph trembling in her hands. It showed her and Daniel on their wedding day, young and impossibly happy, sunlight catching in her veil. Tucked behind that photo, hidden for over a decade, was a second picture, 5-year-old Lily, laughing in a garden that no longer existed in any of their lives. Eleanor stared at it for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I'm sorry." A voice answered from behind her. "You should be." She spun around. Marcus Riley stood in the doorway, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Eleanor rose to her feet instantly. "Who let you in here?" "You know exactly who I am," Marcus said, stepping fully into the room. "I've been investigating this family for 12 years, Eleanor. And after tonight, I think it's finally time you told me the truth. All of it, before your husband walks into a trap that might not let him walk back out." At the warehouse, the standoff between the two brothers had reached its breaking point. Daniel lowered the folder of documents, his mind racing through 12 years of grief, 12 years of blame he had unknowingly placed on the wrong person. "Even if everything in this folder is true," Daniel said slowly, "it still doesn't explain why you took my daughter. An innocent 5-year-old girl. Whatever happened between you and me, whatever Eleanor did, Lily had nothing to do with any of it." For the first time, something flickered across Walter's face. Not triumph. Something closer to regret. "I never wanted to hurt her," Walter said quietly. "I made sure she went to a good woman. Someone kind. Someone who would raise her right, far away from all of this. You stole 12 years from her, from me. I was trying to protect what was mine," Walter said, his voice finally cracking. "And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that made it right." Just then, a side door creaked open, and Marcus Riley stepped through it, flanked by 2 officers from the Charleston Police Department. Behind them, wrapped in a police jacket, stood Claire, pale, shaken, but very much alive. "Dad?" she said softly, testing the word for the very first time. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He crossed the warehouse floor in seconds and pulled her into his arms, 12 years of searching collapsing into a single, overwhelming moment. He held her the way he had imagined holding her every single night since that day on the beach, like he would never let go again. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you, Firefly. I'm never letting you go again." Officers moved in to take Walter into custody. He didn't resist. He simply looked at his brother one last time and said quietly, "I truly am sorry, Daniel," before he was let out into the cold night air. In the weeks that followed, the full truth came out. Eleanor confessed everything to investigators. How Walter had approached her years earlier with the forged documents. How he'd threatened to expose fabricated evidence of fraud against Daniel if she didn't stay silent about Lily's whereabouts. And how fear, more than greed, had kept her from ever coming forward. It didn't excuse 12 lost years, but it explained the terror Daniel had seen in her eyes that very first morning. The woman who had raised Claire, Miss Ruthie, turned out to have had no idea of the truth either. She had genuinely found a frightened, disoriented little girl wandering near a Savannah bus station over a decade earlier and had simply done what any good woman would do. Taken her in, fed her, loved her, and never once tried to profit from her. Walter had arranged it all through intermediaries who never once let Miss Ruthie know who the little girl truly was. Claire, or rather, Lily Ashworth, slowly began piecing her life back together. She moved into her father's home, not as a housekeeper this time, but as his daughter. It wasn't easy. 12 years of memories couldn't be rebuilt overnight. And there were nights she still woke up disoriented, unsure which life was the real one. The girl who scrubbed floors and counted every dollar of her paycheck, or the daughter of one of the wealthiest men on the coast. She would wander down to the kitchen at 2 in the morning out of old habit, half expecting someone to hand her a mop instead of a mug of tea, and Daniel would find her there and simply sit with her at the counter until the panic passed, saying nothing at all, just letting her know she wasn't alone in it. But every morning after that, he was there, patient, present, determined to make up for every single birthday, every missed bedtime story, every single day he hadn't been able to protect her. He taught himself to cook her favorite meals from scratch because he refused to let staff do it for her. He wanted those small, ordinary moments to belong to just the two of them. He kept the DNA report and that first handwritten ransom note locked in a drawer in his desk, not as trophies, but as reminders of exactly how close he had come to losing her all over again, and exactly how much he never wanted to take a single ordinary Tuesday morning with her for granted ever again. Eleanor, for her part, spent the following year in therapy and in quiet, difficult conversations with the daughter she had once been too afraid to protect. Lily didn't forgive her overnight. Some mornings she could barely look at her, but slowly, carefully, something like understanding began to grow between them, built one honest conversation at a time. Walter's trial made headlines across the state, and in the end, the truth he'd spent 20 years burying came out in a courtroom instead of a boardroom, in front of the very family he'd tried to tear apart for the sake of a company that, in the end, meant nothing without them in it. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you believe, even for a moment, that some bonds simply refuse to break no matter how much time passes, I'd love for you to leave a comment and let me know. Stories like this one are why I keep telling them, and I read every single message you send. Daniel Ashworth spent 12 years searching every corner of the map for his daughter, never once losing faith even when everyone around him told him to let go. And in the end, it wasn't a detective or a billboard or a reward offer that finally brought her home. It was a quiet, unassuming young woman in a secondhand coat, walking through his gates looking for nothing more than an honest day's work, carrying, without even knowing it, the one thing her father had spent every single day of the last 12 years praying to find. Sometimes the people who walk into our lives looking like strangers were never strangers at all. Sometimes they're the answer to a prayer we never stopped saying. Even in the years we forgot, we were still saying it. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If it touched you even a little, please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment telling me what part hit you the hardest, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. I'm so grateful for every single one of you who keeps coming back to Untold Maid Confessions. These stories only exist because of you, and I can't wait to share the next one with you very soon.